Y'all want to hear a story? And we talk about a lot of spooky stuff on here, and I'm down with most of it. Like, I don't get freaked out easily. But this story scares the holy bejesus out of me. It's given me literal nightmares. Let's talk about the New Madrid Earthquakes of 1811 and 1812. The New Madrid Fault Line is one of the most seismically active areas in the United States and has produced some of the strongest earthquakes in American history east of the Rockies. The fault line is located in southeast Missouri, northeast Arkansas, western Tennessee, and southern Illinois. From December 1811 through March of 1812, there were 3 major earthquakes and many aftershocks, which had devastating effects in Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and Illinois. The first earthquake occurred on December 16, 1811 at 2:15 a.m. It was centered in Blytheville, Arkansas, and was a 7.5 magnitude. The earthquake was so strong that it was felt in New York City. Dolly Madison, wife of President James Madison, felt it in the White House, and church bells rang in Boston. The first aftershock occurred at 7:15 a.m. And while it's still considered an aftershock, it was a magnitude 7 all by itself and was once again felt on the East Coast. The second earthquake occurred on January 23, 1812 at 9:15 a.m. This time its epicenter was New Madrid, Missouri. This one was a magnitude 7.3 and was actually considered the mildest of the 3 major earthquakes. Don't misconstrue the word mild, though. It was still extremely destructive. Then the third earthquake occurred on February 7th, 1812, around 3 a.m., also centered at New Madrid, Missouri. This one was at least a magnitude 7.5, but some estimate it could have been as strong as an 8.6. It destroyed literally everything from New Madrid all the way up to St. Louis. This earthquake was so strong that it caused the Mississippi River to flow backwards. It caused a fluvial tsunami, a river tsunami, that created huge tidal waves on the river. It completely altered the landscape. It created new lakes, like the Reelfoot Lake in Tennessee and Big Lake in Arkansas. And accounts from witnesses during these events are insane. The earth moved in waves that, like, have you ever shaken out a rug, and that's what the ground was doing. And as these waves of earth peaked, the ground would actually split open. It would burst out sand or soil or even boiling water and left behind giant fissures in the earth. There were extensive landslides. One man's well moved 20 yards from his house. And the giant cracks that would open up, terrifying. It said they hissed and steamed and emitted lightning from inside the earth, caused by seismoluminescence when the quartz gets so compressed under all that pressure that it starts shooting out light and electricity. It said that people started to realize that when these cracks were opening, that they always ran north to south. So they started to cut down trees and to lay them east to west so that when the ground started moving, they could climb on top of these trees and hold on for dear life in case the ground, fell out from underneath them. The sky turned pitch black. The air was so thick that a lantern couldn't penetrate it, and there was a dense fog that reeked of sulfur. It also created something called sand boils. It would be what sounded like a loud explosion, and then this sand would just burst from the ground, sometimes 15 feet into the air. And these sand boils would create like sand craters, like in Haiti, Missouri, where the New Madrid earthquakes created the world's largest sand boil, which locals call the beach. This also created quicksand, that entire trees, sometimes houses, would just bloop into the ground. And something else happened called liquefaction. Basically, where land that was not sand and therefore not set up for quicksand would become like quicksand. You could just bloop, fall into it, sink into it. That is stuff that nightmares are made of. After the third earthquake, it still wasn't over. The aftershocks continued for months, and there were hundreds of moderate earthquakes, which are magnitude 5 or a 6, and thousands of smaller ones, which are a 5 or lower. The ground in these affected areas moved constantly for months. It's estimated that the quakes killed about 1,000 people altogether. The only reason that the death toll wasn't insane is because of how sparsely populated this area was at the time. It was still considered the western frontier, but today, there are 15 million people living in the earthquake zone. For comparison, in 1811, there were 5,700 people living in St. Louis. Today, there are 3 million people in the St. Louis metro area. Here we have a graph from the U.S. Geological Survey that is showing the effect of like a 7.5 to 7.7 magnitude quake and the severity of the earth shaking, based on location. So the white area would be the worst, all the way to the green being the least. Here is another graph showing seismic risk and which areas have adopted a seismic resistant building code and which ones haven't. There's lots of maps showing all kinds of things about the New Madrid, but you know what they don't tell us? They don't tell us about the 15 nuclear reactors sitting along the fault line. Yeah, 15 nuclear reactors right here along one of the most seismically active zones and it has already produced a couple whoppers of freaking earthquakes. And historically speaking, the new Madrid earthquakes are really hard to study. They don't actually know what caused these big ones to actually happen. They don't know exactly how often it's happened in the past, but they think it's happened at least 3 other times in the last 2,000 years. And they don't know when it will happen again. Now, if you read articles from any major news outlets, they're going to say something like there's only a 7 to 10% chance in the next 50 years of another big one. But some scientists estimate that, quote, the probability of a magnitude 6 or larger earthquake occurring in the seismic zone within any 50-year period is 25 to 40%. An article from St. Louis University claims that there is a 90% chance of a 6.0 or greater by the year 2040. And that is more terrifying than any ghost story that any of us could ever come up with.